All right, so let's begin with the key of G. That's the key of G, as in Geronimo, the most obvious word that starts with G. So let's begin there, okay? So G chord. We're gonna keep with this shape for now. This uses all 4 fingers and all 6 strings on the guitar. Next, you can play what we call a C chord, but really it's C2 because it keeps the D note in the chord. A very useful chord. Make sure you don't play the low string, otherwise it turns into something else, a C over E, which we'll talk about in a moment. Another useful chord, but not for right now. So we want G and C, or C2. Then we can play a D chord. Now when you play D chord, make certain that you don't play the lowest string again, because it doesn't work in the key. The way I do that is I actually have my thumb wrapped around. It mutes it. So I can play I don't have to worry about it. If you play the string above E, A, in the D chord, it actually is alright. It doesn't sound bad. It's part of the chord. But definitely don't play this string because it sounds out. It ruins the chord. Okay? Now you could play in the key of E, you could do something called a D2, where you pick up the middle finger. That's a useful chord. You could add the pinky. We call that a D sus4, a D suspended 4. Very useful, okay? Let's talk about some minor chords. E minor, which I use my 2 middle fingers here on the 2nd fret of A and 2nd fret of D. That's always a great chord. You could also use the same shape we've been doing with the G and the C2, like this. Now technically that's an E minor 7 chord, not an E minor. The reason why is this D on the 3rd fret of B string doesn't belong in E minor, so it becomes E minor 7. Great sounding chord. Then there's A minor. Don't play the lowest string. You could also do A minor 7, which means you pick up the ring finger. Another very useful chord. Then there's B minor. Now B minor is a bar chord. Technically it's this. So you're barring all the 2nd fret, and then you're doing what looks like an A minor shape, just slid up here. Again, you don't have to play the low string. But that's a lot of work. There's a way to get around that. You could do this. So I use the index, middle, and ring, 1, 2, and 3. And I go 2nd fret of A, 2nd fret of G, and 3rd fret of B. If you don't get the D string to ring out naturally, that's fine. It can. Don't play the lowest string. If you get the upper string, high E in there, that's okay. It works. It's not a pure B minor. In fact, this isn't either, because that's a B minor 7 minus the F sharp, which is supposed to be in the chord. It's supposed to sound like this, really. Just this is not an easy chord to play. Whatever. That's B minor in a G key of G. Then we have these slashy chords. Those are when you have a chord like C or D, like a major chord, and then you have a note that's after a slash. That means that note that's after the slash is actually the bass note. So, for C, we did this, which is C2, or if we did regular C. And the lowest string would be, the lowest note should be the note after the chord. So if you have C/E, it would be this string. Or a great chord. If you had it for D, usually it's a /F sharp. That would be this note here on the 2nd fret of low E string. I use my thumb, which goes nicely into G major. Then there's one for G, which is usually G/B. So that's the 2nd fret that you're already playing on the A string. Just don't play the low string. So the way to do that is I either use my thumb to mute it, or the way I hold down the A string on the 2nd fret, I mute that string. So it sounds like this. going into C. All right, we'll be back with the key of